Before the Dead Sea Scrolls, before medieval Bible manuscripts, before almost every surviving copy of Scripture, someone rolled sacred words into silver and placed them in a tomb near Jerusalem.
The title sounds like a trick, but it is the point of the whole story. One of the oldest surviving witnesses to biblical wording was not found in a book. It was not copied on parchment in a library. It was not preserved in a synagogue chest. It was rolled into silver. The artifacts are known as the Ketef Hinnom amulets, or the silver scrolls. They came from a burial complex near Jerusalem, and when researchers finally read the tiny writing on them, they found language close to the priestly blessing in Numbers, the blessing that asks the Lord to bless, keep, show favor, and give peace. That does not prove every later biblical book was already finished in the exact form we know. That would be too much. The careful claim is stronger because it is narrower. Words very close to a famous biblical blessing were circulating in Judah before the Dead Sea Scrolls by centuries. And they were not just read, they were worn, hidden, carried close to the body. In 1979, excavations at Ketef Hinnom, southwest of Jerusalem's Old City, uncovered a late Iron Age burial context. Among the finds were two tiny rolled pieces of silver. At first, they did not look like headline-making artifacts. They were small, corroded, and extremely fragile. One was only about the size of a small bead when still rolled, the kind of object that could be missed, broken, or misunderstood. That is why this story works for the hidden tablet. The evidence did not arrive as a giant monument shouting its meaning. It arrived as a miniature object from a tomb, small enough to sit near a fingertip, carrying writing that was never meant for public display. Ancient history often survives because kings carved victory into stone. This survived for the opposite reason. It was private. It was sealed. It was buried. The obvious question is simple. If there was writing inside, why not just unroll it? Because unrolling it could destroy it. The silver sheets were thin, brittle, and corroded after more than 2,500 years. Researchers had to work slowly. Museum of the Bible summarizes the larger scroll as taking years just to unroll, and even after that, deciphering the characters remained difficult. That gives the story its real suspense. The mystery was not only what the text said, the mystery was whether anyone could reach the text without losing it. This is also why the amulets are so different from ordinary manuscripts. A parchment scroll wants to be opened. These objects were written, rolled, and hidden. Their words were present, but concealed. The writing had power even when nobody was reading it aloud. When the writing was studied, the surprise was not a lost gospel or a forbidden chapter. It was something more concrete, blessing language close to Numbers chapter 6. The priestly blessing is one of the most recognizable blessings in the Hebrew Bible. In English, it is often rendered as the Lord blessing and keeping someone, making his face shine, being gracious, lifting his countenance, and giving peace. We should be precise here. The amulets do not give us a full modern Bible. They do not settle every debate about authorship, editing, canon, or transmission. What they do is place a familiar biblical blessing in an Iron Age Judean setting on a physical object that can be dated far earlier than the Dead Sea Scrolls. That is more interesting than a fake cover-up. It means biblical language was not only living in later books, some of it was already living in bodies, burials, protection, and daily religious practice. The amulets also matter because they preserve the divine name. The 4 Hebrew consonants often represented in English as YHWH. For this channel, that connects directly to the earlier story of the name hidden behind Lord in many English Bibles. But the guardrail matters. We should not turn this into a pronunciation fight, and we should not claim more than the evidence gives us. The careful version is this. The Ketef Hinnom inscriptions are among the early archaeological witnesses to the divine name in ancient Judah. That makes them important for the history of worship, writing, and biblical tradition. The object itself tells the deeper story. This was not only a name in a manuscript, it was a name placed on silver, worn close to the body, and buried with the dead. For the ancient owner, the writing may have mattered precisely because it was hidden and carried, not because it was displayed. Modern readers usually think writing exists to be read. A text is useful because eyes move across it. Ancient amulets complicate that idea. A written blessing could be powerful because it was present, even if the letters were tiny, rolled up and invisible. The words could touch the body through the object. They could move with the wearer. They could mark protection, identity, trust, or hope. That does not mean we have to pretend we know the private thoughts of the person who wore it. We do not. But the physical design is clear enough. This was writing made miniature, writing made portable, writing made intimate. That is the emotional center of the video. The oldest biblical wording did not survive only because scribes copied it for readers. It also survived because someone wanted sacred words close enough to wear. The Dead Sea Scrolls are famous for good reason. They transformed the study of biblical manuscripts, but the Ketef Hinnom amulets push one kind of evidence earlier. The usual dating places them in the late First Temple period, commonly around the 7th to 6th centuries BCE, with scholarly discussion around the exact range. Either way, they predate the Dead Sea Scrolls by centuries. That is the line a viewer understands in 3 seconds, older than the Dead Sea Scrolls. But the sharper version is not just about age, it is about format. The famous scrolls are library-like manuscript finds from the Judean desert. These were tiny silver objects from a Jerusalem burial setting. One gives us texts preserved in caves. The other gives us words hidden on a body and buried with a life. Same broad world of scripture, completely different kind of survival. This is where bad versions of the story go too far. They say the amulets prove the Bible exactly as we have it. They do not. What they show is narrower and more useful. A blessing close to Numbers chapter 6 existed in ancient Judah, centuries before our later complete biblical manuscripts. The divine name was written in that blessing context. Sacred words could be copied onto precious metal and used as protective objects. That has consequences. It means parts of the biblical tradition were already old, before many of the manuscripts people usually talk about. It also means religious writing was not trapped inside formal books. It moved through tombs, neck cords, family memory, ritual, and fear. So the real headline is not that archaeology proves everything. The real headline is that a tiny silver amulet preserved one of the oldest physical witnesses to biblical words, and it did so by hiding them. This is the kind of artifact that explains the channel name, a hidden object, a familiar text, a timeline that shifts when the evidence is small enough to miss. The Ketef Hinnom amulets do not need exaggeration. Their power is already built in. They are older than the famous scrolls. They preserve blessing language known from the Bible. They include the divine name. They came from a burial context. They were hidden writing, carried on silver. If the last few centuries of manuscript survival make the Bible feel like a shelf of books, this object reminds us that sacred words had other lives before that. They could be worn, concealed, touched, buried, and remembered. The oldest Bible text was not found in a Bible. It was hidden inside a silver amulet.